Today, I would like to introduce a collaborative project that I have been engaged with for the last 5 years. It's called The Powers. The Powers is essentially a band. It's an electronic music project comprised of myself, Catherine Klein, and Jessica Mensch. In the last few years, we have expanded our musical collaboration to involve theatrical stage spectacles and a live-streamed web series called Sistership TV. In our video and stage performance, we embrace improvisation as a creative strategy. We take up absurd narrative tangents and generate a plethora of imagery using cheap craft materials and high stylization. The result is collage-like, a series of short narrative moments interspersed with humorous interludes. Our aleatory story crafting, along with our goofball attitude and janky aesthetic, was initially motivated by a desire to make fun of the self-serious vibe of the male-dominated music scene. But this practice has become a vehicle for us to engage with various ideas around technology, ecology, myth, and power. As an open-ended, playful methodology, it enables us to develop an entire cosmology of our own and to interpret this cosmology as it unfolds. Our current focus, Sistership TV, is a hybrid, curatorial, and collaborative project. It is a digital variety show where special guests are invited to climb aboard the metaphorical vessel of the sistership to explore a given episode's topic. In typical variety show form, it features live music performances, music videos, interviews, animations, and more. T.L. Cowan describes how the variety show can, by its very structure, promote a particular social, cultural, political formation and consciousness, a cabaret consciousness. This cabaret consciousness is defined by an appreciation of risk, difference, provocation, and surprise, accompanied by a concurrent sympathy with or high tolerance for the rough around the edges aesthetic. Cowan is writing about an intergenerational queer feminist cabaret community in Montreal. And as I compare Cowan's descriptions of these shows to the process of making Sistership TV, I come to think that one could build on this notion of cabaret consciousness by further considering an ethic of variety in relation to feminist politics and the use of camp aesthetics. I look to queer, feminist, and Afrofuturist theory to consider camp's origins and critical potential. I propose that, in the case of Sistership TV, the camp aesthetic and the variety show format both contribute to an ethic of variety. Sistership TV's camp style embraces a maximalist aesthetic, and it follows a multitude of possible threads of variance from the status quo. The variety show functions similarly. It embraces chaos and surprise to engender a sense of abundant possibility. In the first episode of Sistership TV, the Powers explore the themes of telecommunication networks, signal transmissions, cross-species dialogue, spirits, and technology. The episode begins with an interpretive dance involving cardboard icons representing objects that will appear later in the program. The next segment tells the tale of a grotesque Easter bunny who finds an enchanted egg and transforms into an evil Santa figure named Shitty Wizard. Shitty Wizard then performs a real-time laying of the hands ceremony from his basement lair, parodying televangelist practices, asking viewers to touch their screens to form a connection with him. As his echoing maniacal laughter dies off, a crone makes a cheerful phone call, skelephone call, to the award-winning electronic musician Dr. Bevan Kelly to discuss birds, science fiction, and music. Kelly compares the way that birds communicate through sonic mimicry to the practice of audio sampling in music and draws a connection between the sci-fi fantasy of interstellar contact to the alien minds of species on our own planet. After the call, the crone flies through the sky on the back of a cockatoo before dematerializing in a flash of light. 3 crones then convene in front of a television to remediate the video Telepathicats by Canadian art duo Fastworms, which teaches them how to telepathically control the movement of cats using mysterious hand gestures. The show's finale is a ceremony for a deceased cat featuring the cat's holographic head encased in a space helmet. Subsequent episodes feature a wider range of media types and a greater number of guests. Sometimes the guest contributes a pre-existing video work to the show, and sometimes our open-ended invitation results in the collaborative co-creation of a new segment. For example, the Powers worked with dancer-choreographer B. Heinzman Hope to co-conceive of a video reflecting on the myth of Medusa. Violet Cutler lived in residence with us for the production of an entire episode and co-conceived of all live scenes. With guest contributions ranging from curated to commissioned to fully collaborative, the hybridity and flexibility of Sistership TV allows us to collect a variety of individual perspectives and to generate new joint perspectives on episode themes. It allows us to share decision-making power and develop friendships with our guests. According to Cowan, the DIY variety show, by invoking the pleasure of the mixed bag, creates the conditions for a certain open-mindedness, a willingness to accept failures, and a delight in the non-normative. Cowan makes the case that, even if these acts are not overtly or evidently political, the practice of creating these conditions helps performers, organizers, and audiences to imagine new possibilities for themselves and their communities. In their subcultural contexts, these variety shows create a generous ritual space for shared fantasy and offer a multitude of surprises within that space. It is precisely that multitude and that variety that I think inspires a sense of possibility, maybe even hope, that the unknown future could contain something better than the present. It makes sense that camp would be the mode of delivery, given its historical function as a means of critique that resists dominant, limiting conceptions of sexuality and gender. As Mo Meyer notes, the term camp has been associated with excessive expression, style, and artifice since it first appeared in a dictionary of Victorian English slang in 1909. Meyer connects this early conception of camp to Oscar Wilde's resurrection of dandyism, influenced by the Delsactian theatrical tradition. Delsart theorized the tensions between an individual's interior self and an exterior performance of self, and promoted an art of identity presentation based on posture, gesture, costume, and voice. Meyer suggests that there is evidence that Wilde drew on his training in this theatrical tradition to consciously craft a homoerotic identity. According to Jack Babushio, camp eventually became a means of dealing with a hostile environment and in the process of defining a positive identity for subsequent generations of gay men. Susan Sontag's 1964 essay, Notes on Camp, spurred a left-wing bourgeois appropriation of the camp sensibility, which allowed camp to make its way from the underground to the mainstream. Sontag's essay has been criticized by many queer theorists for minimizing the subversive potential of camp and its origins in gay subcultures. While Sontag analyzes camp mostly in relation to taste in her 1964 essay, admitting only a peculiar relation between camp taste and homosexuality, she later, in a 1970s interview, concedes that drag's exaggerated performance of gender has political significance because it questions the limitations that those stereotypes place on women. In the context of drag, the camp exaggeration exposes the absurdity of narrow categorical options like male and female and presents the categories as mutable. It contains both an implicit rejection of existing knowledge systems and a proposal to accept and celebrate more possibilities for ways to live, express, and relate to one another. In this way, an ethic of variety is implied by the suggestion that the current options are too restrictive. We could lament the possibility that the pop cultural appropriation of camp might dilute its subversive potential, but there are cases that restore hope. Michael Schuyler suggests, in a reading of the 1990s BBC comedy show Absolutely Fabulous, that the campy gender critique in the show explodes certain preconceptions about women. The character's obsession with fashion, the one thing that might be stereotypically feminine about them, is so extreme that it overshadows all other aspects of their lives. They hate the inconvenience of motherhood. They can't stay sober. They're disinterested in romantic relationships, and sometimes they start literal fires. It's so much fun. The audience is allowed to just love the character's spectacular failure to meet patriarchal expectations. Schuyler notes that their camp spectacle exposes the normative by hyperbolizing the normal to the point of making it abnormal. For the standards set for women, it acknowledges, are inconceivable and unreal. Camp humor, through its overdoneness and sense of irony, is well adapted to refuting the gender binary. But I want to highlight some artists that expand the language of camp. The performances of Sun Ra, starting in the 50s, and Parliament Funkadelic, starting in the 60s, are known for exaggerated artifice, ironic humor, and flashy costumes that sometimes combine ancient Egyptian and sci-fi iconography. Griffith Rolifson notes that these artistic choices are based in a deep critique of Western rationalism and universalism. Sun Ra and P-Funk use camp strategies to expose the absurdity and small-mindedness of a polarized vision of race, which relies on concepts of linear progression, an ancient past and a sci-fi future, in order to justify itself. Sun Ra developed a concept called myth science, which promotes cosmic mystery over a white-written history. He asserts that we hold this myth to be potential. They hold their truths to be self-evident. Rolifson notes that for Sun Ra, Enlightenment rationality, Western progress, and white supremacy are inseparable. They reflect only one narrow vision of the world and therefore could not possibly capture any real truth. The language of camp can be used to question the very practice of unnecessary and fundamentally limiting categorizations. In the current moment, I note the ways in which camp often targets multiple binaries beyond gender. Natalie Agoro describes how Janelle Monáe and Erykah Badu draw on Afrofuturism to play with multiple identities, recasting themselves as alien, robotic, cyborgian, and time-traveling. The Instagram model Salvia creates highly artificial-looking fashion photos involving animal parts, disfigurations, fantastical bondage gear, cyborgian implants, and often a digitally edited doubling of herself. In my own network, there is Frosty Valentine, a satirical take on the glittery pop star in the form of a giant mouse backed up by hand puppets and vintage funhouse animatronics. And there is Bearbara, a 7-foot-tall purple bear who raps about sexual consent. These campy performances give us pause to question such divisions as human and animal. Human or machine, present or absent, natural or supernatural, beautiful or grotesque, sexy or funny. The Powers brand of camp humor uses satirical contrast to poke fun at limited thinking. The supernatural and the worldly are brought into illusion-busting proximity when the eerie crones have to conduct mundane business like eating and are thwarted by their physiology. These crones are sisters, riffing on classic trinities of sisters that appear throughout Western literature and mythology, but their wizardly beards and pitch-shifting voices make their gender a little ambiguous. The Powers also perform as hybrid mythological beings. Shitty Wizard is part maniacal Santa and part terrifying Easter Bunny. Skelly is a small skeleton superimposed onto an eroticized flesh body. Merwitch is a wise hag and a fish. There is also the multi-character Blob, who is inspired by scientific confusion over the status of slime mold. Is it plant or animal? Is it one being or many? In order to invent these characters, we foster a fantastical play space, which helps us expand the range of possibilities for how we might conceive of an alternate reality, and thus consider the limitations of a quotidian reality. The variety show seduces the audience to take pleasure in the feeling of not knowing what's coming and to embrace this unpredictability with open arms as a source of excitement. With the Powers, an appreciation for risk and variety is also engendered in the production process. Our world building is unplanned and open-ended, and our model of curation is one of hybrid collaboration. Camp strategies, meanwhile, keep us alerted to the broken system within which we are entrenched, by presenting it as failed and ridiculous. Because camp assaults the coherency of the current state of affairs, It has the potential to fuel the desire for a greater variety of options. An ethic of variety, of situated perspectives, ways of living, and ways of framing reality raises some hope that there might be something unexpected around the corner and there might be some good in it. The spectacle of feminist variety, which draws on this sensibility, is not a utopian project, but one that feebly attempts, using available means, to keep reconfiguring ideas until a better future starts to emerge. Thank you.